Number 3 is do not exclude legal, compliance, relevant stakeholders from the journey, especially if you're starting from scratch and you're now introducing this brand new program. You want to bring, especially legal and compliance, you want to bring them along the journey. You want them to feel comfortable, because a lot of the times that fear comes from them. They don't really understand this type of thing. So all they see is, people are going on social media, they're talking about the company. No, we must stop this, abort mission immediately. But if we take them along that journey, we bring them right from the beginning when we're laying the groundwork, when we're trying to put together guidelines and policies. If we bring them in, then they're brought in and we can take them on that journey to understand why it's important, why it's safe. Of course, there's risk, but ultimately why it's a good thing and it's a safe thing. As long as we put guardrails in place, it is a positive thing to do.
Welcome to the Internal Marketing Podcast, the unique podcast series where we flip the marketing conversation from external to internal, exploring all the ways that companies can build a brand and drive growth by marketing to their most powerful brand advocates, their very own employees. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann Stimson, and I'm very happy to be bringing you this episode where we'll be discussing what you should not do when implementing an employee advocacy program of your own. But before we get started, remember that building an employee advocacy program doesn't just happen overnight. It means that you need to be creating a stream of positive, engaging content to get them bought in and to encourage them to start sharing it. The best place to create that content is with Workshop. It's an internal email platform for creating beautifully branded, employee-specific campaigns. Head on over to useworkshop.com/marketing to learn more and download their complete guide to building an employee advocacy program. And of course, Workshop is the global sponsor of Season 3 of the Internal Marketing Podcast. Thank you, Workshop. I'm happy to have you on board. So let's jump into this conversation with my featured guest, Yvonne Boateng. Yvonne is an employee advocacy consultant, and she'll be sharing what you should not do when implementing an employee advocacy program in your company. Hi, Yvonne. Thank you so very much for joining me here for this another episode of the Internal Marketing Podcast. Welcome. I really appreciate your joining me here today.
Thank you, Kerry-Ann. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm very excited to be here with you. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. We are going to have a great conversation. And as we were sharing in the lead up before we actually started to hit the record button, we were talking about this particular topic today because I decided to do a little bit of a different spin on the employee advocacy conversation. So when we talk about internal marketing, we know internal marketing is about engaging and empowering employees to become advocates of the company brand. And so I like to think of employee advocacy as the final output or outcome of a great internal marketing strategy, right? But I feel like there are a lot of people who are talking about what you should do to roll out your own employee advocacy program. But I thought for this conversation, we could do a little bit of a different spin and talk about the things you should not be doing. Because sometimes I find you get some different kind of nuggets when you look at it from the other vantage point of asking yourself, what shouldn't I be doing when I roll out an employee advocacy program, or when it's even actually up and running? What are some of the things I need to look out for that I shouldn't be doing to make sure that my employee advocacy program works? So I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be great. But Yvonne, I always like to start out my conversations with a nice level setting question. And in this case, I don't like to assume. I know we have a global audience listening to us, and I don't like to assume that everybody knows exactly what employee advocacy is. So I'd love for you to start out by sharing with us, what is employee advocacy? If you could give us a nice working definition to take us through.
Sure. So officially, it's an organized way for employees to promote their brand, the brand that they work for, the company they work for, on social media through the use of content, often through technology sometimes. And it really helps to generate awareness, trust, credibility about the brand. It's simple, but it's powerful. So now, unofficially, what I like to say is employee advocacy is about shifting that focus away from the brand itself, and it empowers your best advocates, your people. It gives them a platform, it gives them training, it gives them the ability to share their voice. and ultimately to become influencers, because we are all trying to influence our communities, whether that's customers, potential clients, but ultimately we can become influencers in our own right on the topics or on the role that we do.
Yeah, it's certainly very valuable. And I think anyone who digs into the whole matter of employee advocacy and looking at companies who have rolled out their own employee advocacy program, I think we can all agree that there's so much power in brands continuing to engage and leverage the personal brands of their employees as a key weapon, as I like to say, in their arsenal of building the company brand. But my next question would be, because it sounds great in theory, my next question is employee advocacy better suited for some industries than others or different company types? I mean, does employee advocacy work for everybody?
For me, regardless of the company, the size, what stage they're at, what sector you're in, the top priority should always be the people. We've heard that saying, people buy from people. People are the ones selling the products. They are the ones marketing the product. It is the people that are engaging with your clients, your customers. So when we keep them at the heart of it, we empower them, because ultimately buyers are buying into their perspective, their approach to solving the problem. So people should be the priority, regardless of which sector, what size your company is. And if they are properly trained, you can empower them to become influencers. That is it to bring more brand awareness? Is it to generate leads, generate sales? Is it to just attract talent? No matter what sector you're in, you need something. You're selling something. You're selling your company for people to join. You're selling a product. You're selling a service. And you need your people to do that, because they do it the most effectively. I think regardless of where you are, employee advocacy can be rolled out in your organization. It might look a little bit different. You may not use a platform, for example. You may be just training them on how to create content, how to build a personal brand. You may feel it's not valuable to onboard, a whole tech for your organization that might be smaller. So it might just be educating the workforce on why this is important and how they can do it effectively. So yes, I would 100% say it is valuable for every single type of company.
I love that you made that clarification, because I know LinkedIn is the platform where you and I would have connected initially. And I know that in the B2B space, a lot of B2B brands are getting on the employee advocacy train. We see lots of research and studies coming out that show that more B2B companies are investing a greater portion of their marketing budgets, as it were, into employee advocacy and employee advocacy programs. But based on what you're sharing, B2C could benefit as well. What would that look like? Because I think the B2B is kind of obvious, but what would it look like for a B2C company where it's more about, I guess, retail services and products? How would that look for them?
Yes, I would say 100% is very valuable in B2C. And what would that look like? If we take Dove, for example, they have a lot of products and they have a lot of people creating products. Now, if you are somebody who's passionate about what you do, you're out there talking about, hey, I just had this offsite. It could be as simple as saying, I've just had this offsite, or I've just spent, a day brainstorming with my team. What you're doing is you're reflecting what your company stands for, that they are empowering their people. They invest in their people. They're creating an environment where you can, go somewhere and have a few days together and really dig deep into whatever it is. For some people, that's an amazing experience. So that could be what you're talking about. And what you're doing by default is you're letting people outside know, hey, wow, this is a company that really invests in me as an individual, in me as a professional. So I want to work for them. And I think I would say that's the biggest opportunities that people sometimes miss if they are on B2C. They feel it's not valuable. But I've done training for law companies on building their personal brands, for example. I've worked with somebody that's delivered training to construction companies, to people that work for skincare. And the power rings true. And to me, I sometimes feel like this is real. The benefits are there, but I think the fear of it consumes people genuinely. And I think if that fear was removed through education, through change management, then I think things will get a little bit easier. It already is. I think we're finding more companies on this, employee advocacy train. But I think there's so much more potential there. And I'm excited because I think I see it. I'm seeing it in front of my eyes and it's a beautiful thing.
It certainly is. And I'm glad that you're sharing some wonderful examples, because what you're sharing shows that employee advocacy can have different outcomes, and I guess the obvious outcome that people tend to talk about is brand and revenue, lead generation. But you're also talking about employer branding and how employee advocacy can support the development of a great employer brand. I mean, since we're on that topic then, Yvonne, could you share what do you see as the primary benefits of having an effective employee advocacy program in a company? For those people who are listening and still not yet convinced that it's something that they should be investing in for their company, what's your take on the benefits that they stand to gain?
From the company's point of view, your company becomes human. People can now relate to it. If you give your people that voice and you put them in front of the logo, all of a sudden you've got 100 people saying positive things about their working environment, their work life. And that by default has a halo effect on the brand, on the company in so many different ways. It's a win-win situation for the company and for the employee who's building their personal brand, their thought leadership status is growing, their influence is growing. Now, when they speak, you're tapping into an audience, into a community you never would have had access to if not for that employee. So I think, yes, there is always risk. There is always risk, but most times, and I've rolled out and supported global companies in regulated industries, the risk, the benefits always almost outweigh the risk. And that's what I would say is test it. If this is something that you think, okay, I see the benefits to us as the company where it humanizes our brand, it helps us to attract talent, it's great for brand awareness. Let me test this out with a small subset of people. And there's a whole other discussion on how to launch a pilot. But test it out and make sure that you understand really what you can gain from, because there is a lot to gain. I call it a win-win-win. It's a win for the company, it's a win for the individual, and it is a win for the community that they are speaking to, that they are influencing, because ultimately they are adding value to that community.
I love that you pointed out the win for the community, because ultimately they too benefit. And I appreciate that you're highlighting that, because there's the obvious benefit to the company. There is also, you could say, the obvious benefit to the employee who is building their personal brand, their own reputation, can really reap a lot of dividends for their career and their other professional pursuits. But the companies who get to benefit from the awesome, valuable content that comes out from that working partnership between the company brand and the personal brands of the employees as part of employee advocacy is also very powerful. We've been saying some great things about employee advocacy, Yvonne, and I feel like while I am heartened rather by the research that I've seen where more companies seem to be jumping on board, I still think there's a lot of room for more companies to begin to subscribe to the concept of employee advocacy. And so my question is, why do you think more companies aren't jumping on board as they should? I mean, yeah, we're seeing the traction and we're excited, but there's still a little bit of a way to go. And I guess there are certainly some things holding companies back. What would you say those things are? Why are they even issues anyway?
Yeah, it really all comes from fear. The fear and the possible risk of an employee sharing too much, of saying too much, of perhaps unknowingly, revealing confidential things. There was a recent story with an Apple contractor the story was the contract was not renewed after her TikTok video went viral. There was a correction that apparently there was no link. But it really begs the question, why should we silence employees we should encourage it. And whether brands know it or not, employees are already on social media. They already have an audience. They are already sharing content. I think companies are missing the tricks when they don't get behind it. Yes, there will always be risk. Yes, there will always be the one employee that might say something, but the benefits always almost outweigh the risk. And if they are already sharing, we should be the wind beneath their wings and give them some guardrails, give them some guidance and tap into, I call it the halo effect, tap into that halo effect, because it is there, it is proven, it's a no-brainer. But that fear of that one employee that might accidentally say something just completely puts fear into, especially if you're in a regulated industry. You don't want bad reputation. You don't want the bad press. You don't want to have to pay a fine for something, So this is really where the fear comes from. I think the other fear is, if we put our employees out there, they'll look for another job. I heard that straight from a VP's mouth in a room for an electrical company. They're just going to get new jobs. And it's a whole education piece that needs to happen. It's a whole mindset shift that needs to happen. If they want to look for a new job, they will look for a new job regardless. What you're doing is tapping into the power and the influence they already have. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. And I do agree. I think it's fair. It's, as you rightly highlighted, fair that an employee is going to go rogue and bring the brand into disrepute. I myself work as CMO of a financial group. And that's a real fear, that content is being put out there that's in contravention of the regulations, and you may get a letter or some kind of sanction in the worst case scenario when those things happen. So it's a real thing. And fear of loss of talent is also another thing too. My counter to that is always, when you put great talent out there to show their brand, even if they end up leaving or they get poached, they've done such a great job of positioning your brand as an awesome employer brand. You'll attract great people just as easily.
I love that view, Kerry-Ann. Yes, they have left you better than they found you, right? If they've shared content, they've left you in a better place. So that in itself is a tick. I love that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, as you rightly highlighted, there are so many different directions that we could take this conversation. You talked about what the steps you take to launch a pilot program, which is a whole other episode and a great one too, it would be. But let's dive now into the main part of this discussion, which are the things that you should not be doing when you're launching or sustaining or keeping your employee advocacy program in place. And I think that's a great angle to take. And I know that as an employee advocacy consultant, you have tons of experience and nuggets and lessons learned over the years working with so many different companies in so many different industries. I know you're itching to share them with us. So Yvonne, please, could you go through for us, tell us the 10 things that in your experience, a company should not do if they want to win at employee advocacy?
This is such a good one, Kerry-Ann. I, like you say, I've seen the best and I've seen areas of improvements from different sectors. So this is an interesting one for me. So I think the first thing would be, don't expect to launch a program and for it to immediately take off and for employees to immediately run with it. I think employers need to take one step back and ask yourself, is the culture right? Is your culture ripe for launching an employee advocacy program? So for example, if you're in a risk-averse organization or financial company, and you've previously told employees to stay away from social media when it comes to talking about the brand, to then onboarding a platform and hiring someone, and that someone was me, telling them to stay away, to then onboarding a platform, to then hiring someone to launch and train the workforce, that just won't work. There's a whole big change management piece that needs to happen, an education piece that needs to happen to tell people this is okay. We've changed our stance. We've seen that this is valuable and we want to support you, empower you, and train you. That has to be done before you even think, right, let's launch it and bounce to the next project. No, this needs this piece needs time and it requires internal marketing, which is your space, Kerry-Ann. It requires internal marketing to get more users on the platform, to get them bought in to the vision, to get them powered and passionate about it. So then they can translate that onto a platform like LinkedIn. So I think number one is don't expect to launch and bounce. You have to make sure your culture is right. That's number one.
Love it.
Yeah. And then for number two, and this again was a big piece, is don't be confused about which department owns the program ultimately. So define your objective straight up. And what I mean by that is, who is the department that's either got the buy-in from execs or has funded it or is leading it? That, whatever department they're in, so for example, whether it's HR, sales, marketing, their primary objectives will probably be top. So when you're reporting, that's probably the top number that you need to bring into every single report. It needs to be there, all the metrics for it. And if that's not clear, which department is leading it, I mean, you could collaborate. I've been in an org where HR and marketing collaborated. They paid for it. They shared the cost, but the ownership was not defined. So when we were doing internal communications, there was a conflict. HR was going from the point of we want to attract top talent. Marketing were going from a different angle. So it seems really simple, but it should not be overlooked or taken lightly because each department will come at it from a slightly different angle in terms of communication and in terms of reporting. So be sure to clarify that super early and manage expectations. That would be number two. And number three, so I would say number three is do not exclude legal, compliance, relevant stakeholders from the journey, especially if you're starting from scratch and you're now introducing this brand new program, brand new initiative. You want to bring, especially legal and compliance, you want to bring them along the journey. You want them to feel comfortable because a lot of the times that fear comes from them. They don't really understand this type of thing. So all they see is, people are going on social media that they're talking about the company. No, we must stop this, abort mission immediately. But if we take them along that journey, we bring them right from the beginning when we're laying the groundwork, when we're trying to put together guidelines and policies. If we bring them in, then they're brought in and we can kind of take them on that journey to understand why it's important, why it's safe. Of course, there's risk, but ultimately why it's a good thing and it's a safe thing. As long as we put guardrails in place, it is a positive thing to do. So do not exclude your stakeholders, especially legal and compliance.
I'm glad you're raising that, Yvonne, because I think that's a major concern because we spoke about fear being one of the reasons why companies would not want to go down the path of pursuing an employee advocacy program. And in fact, just a few days ago, I was having a conversation with one of my LinkedIn connections who is about to embark on rolling out their own employee advocacy program. And they're in a financial institution pretty much like me. And one of her first questions was, how do I deal with legal and compliance? But I think it's a very important point that having your legal and compliance people as part of that conversation helps you to understand the pitfalls, the risks, and as you say, the kind of guardrails you need to put up around the program so that the brand remains protected ultimately.
Address their concerns and let them see that you are, trying to address every concern that they have. And they'll feel so much more at ease. So yeah, I am so happy that person asked you that question. My answer would be bring them in straight away.
Lovely. Great. Number 4.
So number 4, I would say make sure that your leadership are visible and they are actively saying this is a good thing to do. I mean, you may not get all leaders, that's fine, but who is that person who's going to get behind the program and kind of lead by example? Because if you are asking your employees to do something, you send a one-off email and that's it. They never see any leaders posting. I mean, it's all talk, right? There's no action behind it. So you want that person to lead by example, to set the tone. This is okay. They're creating content as well. And that really helps to encourage the workforce. They see the leaders doing it and it makes it feel that little bit more okay. So do not think your leaders are not important, they need to be visible and they need to proactively say, hey, this is a good thing for you to do.
Alrighty, love that one. Okay, number 5.
Yes, I would say pushing content out that is not good content, that's self-promoting, that's just saying, hey, we're this fabulous company, look at all these wonderful products and services that we have. Nobody would want to share that with their personal networks. Remember, this is my personal network. The content needs to resonate. It needs to be something that my people, my network will be interested in. Third-party content is good. Content that's uplifting, that's educational, that's in about the industry. You're more likely to get your employees sharing that content, educating their own network, engaging in good, conversation, as opposed to, hey, we've just launched this new product. So do not just push out self-promoting content or content that's not engaging. So that would be my next flag.
Right. And I'm in agreement with that too. And you're alluding to it, is that if you want to engage employees to want to be a part of the program, I think if they see that all you're really going to use them as are digital billboards, they're not going to be interested, because this is their personal network of family, friends, neighbors. If all my family and friends can look forward to is the intermittent, look at us, we're a great company post, they're going to disengage, and I'm going to lose trust and lose authenticity with them. So very important point. Thank you for making it.
That is it. Yeah, no, thank you. It's such a missed one. I see it so often. So I think it's a big one to call out. Okay, I think we are on
number 6.
I would say try not to run a program, think you're going to scale without a platform. Yes, it's easy to launch employee advocacy, but if you are a big organization and you're looking, into the future and you want it to scale, try not to do that without a platform. Yes, it can be done, like I say, but it's more difficult without a platform if you are a large organization. If you're small, it's very doable. But if you're a large organization trying to scale without a platform, it becomes very manual and it becomes an extra, work that can be challenging sometimes, especially if you're in a global organization, and it will be challenging to measure ROI. Because ultimately, we need to be able to say to X stakeholder, hey, this is valuable. This has brought us X return, so we should do more of it. If you don't have a program that can collate that data, then it will be challenging to, really roll up and say, here's the benefit.
Understood. And I think that's a point that I don't know how many people get, because it ties to the heart of measurement, is what I'm picking up from you. So having a platform, and to be clear, we're talking about some kind of technology platform or software that facilitates employee advocacy, sharing, and so on. But I'm seeing you're leading to the fact that platform also enables measurement. And measurement speaks to the heart of justifying why this thing works and how is it benefiting us in the first place.
Yes. I think without that, we're just spinning a wheel and hoping some magic is happening outside. But with that platform, you can measure and actually put a number behind what you're doing. So I would say the next thing to not do is do not treat employees like you said earlier, like they're a billboard. Like marketing, do not mandate it. Traffic to your site, brand awareness, lead gen, social recruiting, they're all indirect byproducts of a program. So if we get them bought in because we've told them what's in it for them, we've given them training, we don't need to force it, because ultimately they'll want to do it, they'll get bought into it, and it will seem more natural. It will seem more, more authentic, because they're genuinely creating content that they would have shared anyway. We don't want them to come across as megaphones, just regurgitating the brand. There's no value in that. Number 8, so do not ignore employees' personal brand. So yes, there is a big win for the company. We know this. But if you want to get buy-in from your employees, who are your best advocates, We want to get them to a state where they are influencers in their own rights with their network. We have to let them know that, hey, we're also helping you with your personal brand. We know this is important to you as an individual, to you as a professional in your career. So we want to position you as an influencer, as a thought leader. So these are the trainings available to you. These are the resources available to you. So I would say, do not ignore employees' personal brands. This is something that you have to repeat. And I really emphasize that, Kerry-Ann, because in one of the organizations I supported, the same question was coming up. Why should I do this? It can't be repeated enough. It needs to be consistently repeated. What's in it for them? We have to be able to answer what's in it for them. If you want someone to take an action, to do something, what's in it for them? And make that really, really clear. And one of the benefits is it's helping their personal brands, which reap benefits for their career, for their professional state and all that good stuff. So I would say, do not ignore that part of the journey.
Absolutely. I think you've said it well. And I know that's a tussle as well in the business world, whether you're talking about employee advocacy or not, is a lot of companies, again, are very afraid to go back to that thing called fair. They're afraid of the idea of an employee base that's empowered to build their personal brand. And companies would rather muzzle those brands. You can't post, you can't this, you can't that. Again, not recognizing that ultimately they're posting anyway. They're going out into their social lives and posting. So the question is, how can you partner with them and leverage their personal brands and empower them with the tools they need to be able to build those brands in a way that's aligned with the purpose and the values of the company brands?
That, my friend, is the secret sauce. It is the secret sauce. And because of this fear, like I say, it's a true, genuine fear. When I was doing training, I moved from calling it personal brand at one point to professional brand, because it just seemed like that is what people felt a little bit more comfortable with. Personal felt too personal. So I started calling it, hey, come and learn how to build your professional brand. And that was the thing that really helped kind of get people onboarded, trained, and wanting to get involved, and leaders being a little bit, okay with it, because we're building a professional brand. It's nothing personal. We're not talking about anything else. It's professional.
Yeah, that sounds like an easier pill to swallow, I think, for everybody. So we have two more left. Number 9.
Number 9, do not have guidelines that are way too rigid and that put fear into employees. Oh, this is one. So try to avoid a lengthy document with too much detail. But of course, in some companies, for example, financial organizations, if you're in the regulated industry, it's necessary to have a hefty document. It's unavoidable. So what you should do is you need to have a one-pager that really summarizes what the do's and don'ts are, or what the guiding principles are, and, is it a 20-page document? Have you buried it somewhere deep in your intranet that people probably won't find? You don't know if they've read it. Have they read it? Have they not? So you want to, yes, have that document. And if it's hefty, then really pull out the main points you want people to remember and make it empowering. Not so much, don't do this, don't do that, but here are the things you can do. Here are some, ideas, and just really give the power back to them, empower them to make sound judgment because you've trained them. So I would say, do not have guidelines that are scary and that are too rigid and that put fear in your employees, because they just won't do it.
That's right. The simpler it is, the easier it is to understand, of course, but the more empowered you feel, because it's not like some complicated legal document where you're afraid to even breathe because you don't know if that's against the rules, So absolutely, I'm agreed on that. And then finally, number 10.
Number 10. This is a one-liner. Do not expect, and I've mentioned it already, do not expect to launch and bounce, or launch and think done, because no, this needs someone to constantly and consistently, wave that flag You need the, ambassador that will do their own little road show, invite themselves to meetings, to town halls, all hands, and just take a few minutes to say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why. This is how you get involved. It needs somebody constantly doing that, constantly going back to employees and saying, this is the impact that your participation has had, that your content has had, and, keep doing it. You can introduce incentives here to make sure that you get more people on the program. But ultimately, you have to constantly engage your advocates and also try to bring in new ones. Of course, the more you have, the better. So don't expect to launch and bounce. Find a way to keep engaging the employees to get more people on board with your program.
Absolutely agreed on that, because it's like any program, I think. If you don't feed it, if you don't give it the things that it needs to succeed, you constantly need to be assessing and reassessing what's working, what's not working, making adjustments and pivoting along the way. I think is a great way to wrap up on these 10 points. Yvonne, thank you so very much. I think these are all great. I'm sure everybody was taking copious notes while you were speaking.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
But my penultimate question, which is also a standard question I ask all of my featured guests, is, in your view, of everything you would have shared here today, if our listeners were to come away with one thing, one key nugget, what would that nugget be? What would you want our listeners to come away with having learned today, everything you would have shared?
Can I be cheeky and have two key takeaways?
Sure. I'm not going to charge, so that's fine. Go ahead.
So the first thing I would say is lay the groundwork. This is key. If you are a company that especially is told their employees, stay away from this, and now you want to encourage it, which is great, you have to really set the groundwork. You have to put together your social media guidelines, focus more on that positive aspect, which is what we've spoken about, and just make sure that they have the guardrails, but they also understand that we are encouraging this. So lay the groundwork through your guidelines and also through actively saying, this is okay. We've changed our stance and we want to empower you to do this now. So that will probably be my first nugget. The second one would be to constantly, every single time you talk about employee advocacy, constantly talk about what's in it for them. You have to answer that question every single time. If you want to gain more employees, if you want to gain their influence, you have to answer for them what's in it for them. That would be my kind of a last point, because like we say, it's a win-win-win. So tell them every single time
what's in it for them. And I've always been a subscriber of this saying that says employees ultimately work for themselves. They don't work for companies, because there's a reason why they're with your company. And usually that reason is self-serving. It's a way to feed themselves and their families, or it's a way to advance whatever professional career goals they have for themselves. So ultimately, people work for themselves. And so if you want to leverage them and their own personal brands in your company brand building and revenue growth journey, then they need to understand the benefit to themselves also. In the same way, there's that reason why they show up every day to do work. What's the reason that you want them to show up every day online to the benefit of their brand, but also to the benefit of the company brand as well? That's a great way to end this conversation.
That is a gem. Thank you, Kerry-Ann. That was amazing.
No. Well, I mean, inspired by everything you would have shared, this is wonderful. Thank you so much, Yvonne. And, I'm so very grateful to you to take the time from your very busy schedule to come and be here and to be a part of this conversation. And of course, I like to wrap my conversations by asking all my guests, including you now, how can we, the Internal Marketing Tribe, support you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Karen. I have enjoyed this conversation. So it's been great questions. I got a little bit passionate and riled up in some of them, but yeah, it's been great. I would say you can follow me on LinkedIn. Please engage in my content, continue sharing content, because I am inspired personally every day. by LinkedIn. So I thank you. I thank the network for always sharing, and follow me on LinkedIn and let's talk.
Absolutely. And yes, I do encourage everyone to follow Yvonne on LinkedIn, and we'll leave the link to her profile and her bio and everything and all that good stuff will be in the show notes. So anyone who wants to know how to find you and connect with you, they can look there. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Internal Marketing Podcast. I hope you got some great takeaways from this conversation. And if you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, then please join the tribe. And don't forget, feel free to share this podcast with anyone whom you believe will find it valuable as well. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann Stimson, and I look forward to your joining me next time.